Great. Well, thank you for your comments and thank you for stepping up and accepting this appointment by the mayor. Folks like yourself, I think will bring an invaluable amount of perspective, certainly by what I can see on your resume. But what I would like to do right now, Mr. Lampier, I'd like to ask the other members of the committee if they have any questions or comments regarding your appointment. So I'd like to start with Vice Chair Flaherty.
Oh, thank you. Well, Mr. Lampier, thank you so much for bringing your considerable experience and your unique perspective to bear on the issues that affect the disabled community in Braintree. I want you to know how much I really appreciate it when residents like you step up to do jobs like these, because you add a lot of value to the town, and the town benefits a great deal from the thoughtful advice that we get from residents who join various boards and organizations in Braintree. So my question for you tonight really is, what are the areas where you feel like Braintree needs to focus to improve the way that we include the members of the disabled community in Braintree?
Yeah, I mean, for me, often, you know, I having worked in disabilities, we often have folks who don't have challenges making accommodation decisions or making improvements. And so, you know, whenever there's a project or an effort, you know, it's nice to have someone with a little personal experience to give some insight. So, you know, for example, on our campus, we built a new building and it's got some door buttons to enter. But the buttons are placed in such a way that if I'm traveling in a scooter, for example, the buttons don't work for me. So the buttons are there, the building's accessible, but there was never really any design thought into how a user is actually going to use it. So, you know, I'm just thinking, for an example, my son plays at Doherty Gym. We've added a ramp to the front, which before that made the building very difficult for me to enter. But we still have about a 40% grade on the path to get to the ramp. So if you really are mobily challenged, you know, the ramp that's built is great, but it still isn't sort of meeting the personal need of someone who has to, you know, access the front of the ramp. So I think, you know, having a sense of, you know, when there's a project, when we're making improvements for accessibility, that we're really taking an eye on what, you know, we're meeting the full need, not just sort of checking the box. And so, I mean, that's just one example. But, you know, as a parent of a kid who plays a lot of sports, you know, we have a lot of, you know, crumbling pavement, crumbling walkways. And, you know, I think over time, some of that stuff was neglected. And as we try to make improvements and address those things, you know, and prioritizing them, you know, making sure we're doing those in the best way possible to truly solve the problem. So I hope that sort of gives you a sense of kind of my approach to things. Realizing that physical accessibility isn't the only, you know, issue. You know, we have, you know, people in the community with a range of disability challenges, and trying to be open to, you know, all of those needs, and making sure we're trying to, you know, serve all of our citizens.
Well, I couldn't agree more, especially with your point about how important it is to ask the members of the community that you seek to serve when you try to serve them about how best to do that. I think that sometimes gets overlooked. And so I'm glad to know what you bring to the table, and you know, thank you. Just thanks again for the time and energy you would like to dedicate to this issue. Thanks.
Is that any other questions or comments, Councilor Flaherty?
No, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask now Councilor Mackin if you have any questions or comments.
Hey, thank you for joining us tonight. And my first question was similar to what Councilor Flaherty just asked, so I won't make you repeat yourself. I do have a question for Chief of Staff Todd. What's the current, how many members are on our current Commission on Disabilities, and what's their role really in the town?
So we currently have, I think it's four or five. And the commission meets the first Monday of every month. They review a variety of issues, including, one that they recently did was talk about handicap parking violations and a better way to offer enforcement of those handicap parking violations to collect fines and also ensure compliance with the laws. And they recommended funding out of that account a pilot program with a parking enforcement officer whose focus is enforcement of handicap violations. So that pilot program is ongoing. They also, from time to time, review design plans for projects to ensure compliance and have an opportunity to weigh in on those. They recently discussed COVID impacts, specifically on the disabled community, and what the town may be able to do to better serve them. They've recently recommended funding for accessibility improvements over at Sunset Lake. And so it's a pretty broad mandate. And so they have some breadth in the areas that they can consider and evaluate and make it's recommendation based.
Okay, all right, thank you for that explanation. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Councilor Mackin. And now I'd like to ask Councilor Maglio, any questions or comments?
Yes, both actually, questions and a comment. So I would like to welcome you to this meeting tonight and to serve the community in this way. I'm very excited that you'll be joining. I guess some of my questions were already answered. So I'm going to jump to, have you ever actually watched a video of the current commission, any of the meetings?
I must confess that I haven't.
Okay.
I've sort of in my own mind threatened to join a lot of meetings and attend, and I've made reasons not to. So I don't have a lot of context. And actually, Councilor Mencken's question was actually helpful to me to get a little more context about what the commission has been currently doing.
Okay, so you'll be able to form your own opinions and impression, and but I would like to share a little bit of perspective with you. I've been attending the meetings now for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and what I find is that it's a very important vehicle for the voice of people who need accommodations and who we need to ensure that we're listening to their lived experience in order to make the community accessible to them. And what I find is that that's been a very difficult task. It tends to be somewhat adversarial. It tends to be somewhat, some projects seem to take years when they appear to be simple, but they may not be so simple. And so there is a level of frustration on the commission from some of the members around the lack of real ability to move things through the commission process, to even get the commission to support something to then take it to the town for the town's input and weigh in. And so I guess my question to you would be, how do you see yourself being able to move issues, important issues of access and equity through the agenda of the commission that's actually set up to do just that, but seems to not really be able to do that consistently or speedily?
Sure. Well, without knowing that the members on the commission and sort of things, but I do know, it's easy to sort of get caught up in sort of your own, gripes and complaints, and sort of, focus on those and sometimes forget that, if you're going to accomplish something, you've got to work together. And, sometimes you're so concerned about having the perfect solution that you pass up on the opportunity to do some good things. And so, I'm definitely not one to say, before we move something forward, we have to answer all the questions or we have to know all those solutions. But if we're going to make a difference, time is important, and you can't sort of spin your tires for a couple of years on an issue if you're trying to get results for people. So, I like to think of myself as sort of a consensus builder. That's what I've done in sort of my work role, is try to bring people together to move things forward. And I've been working in an environment with limited resources. And you need to get, certain people on board sometimes to move things forward. So I guess I would just describe myself as someone who, is invested in that and, don't have a lot of patience, I suppose, for inertia. We've got to get stuff done and we got to work with folks. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Excellent. It does. It does. I'm excited to have some energy and some perspective brought to the commission. I have a second question, and it's actually to Ms. Taub. If I'd be able to ask you a question at this point, is that okay? Or do I just need to ask Mr. Lamphere? Okay. So
with the chair's permission, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay, so there are other openings on the commission, and as we know, there have been, I think, only 4 members now for quite a few years, and there have been a few other members of the community who have applied and who do have lived experience and who could probably work quite well with Mr. Lamphere. And I'm wondering what the reason would be to only add 1 member when we can have up to, I believe it's 8 or 9, and this only brings us to 5.
So we are currently reviewing the applications for membership for all committees and are working to place people where the mayor determines is most appropriate. Mr. Lamphere's resume clearly stands out, and he brings a level of expertise here. We felt it was important to get him through to the committee so that he could join us and continue the good work of the commission as soon as possible.
Absolutely, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have him, but is there a date or a timeline as to when some of those other decisions? I know someone has had his resume in for maybe almost 2 years now, I believe.
I'm not familiar with who you're talking to. We can certainly talk about that offline, and I'm not prepared to give you a date for the other appointments at this time.
Okay, so then we'll definitely circle back to this, and I can send you the names of those folks who have been waiting for some time. We
Sure.
can
Happy to look at
that
those
via email. Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Great.
That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you, Chief of Staff, for your responses to those questions. And certainly, I'd like to give Mr. Lamphere the last word here, opportunity. If there's anything else you'd like to add before the council takes its, before the committee makes its recommendation.
I don't think so. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope, I hope to make a significant contribution and, move things forward for the town and the folks involved. So.
Terrific. All right. Well, with that being said, I would like to ask the committee members if there is a motion. Do I have a hand? So moved. I believe I heard Vice Chair Flaherty make the motion for approval, recommended approval. Is that correct?
Would you like me to read the motion? If you don't
Yes,
have it,
please.
I can read the motion.
Please.
I do not. I'm actually looking for that. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, I'll read the motion. For favorable recommendation to the full council in accordance with section 3-3 of the charter of the town of Braintree to approve the appointment of Scott Lamphere to the Commission on Disabilities.
Okay, and we have a motion from Vice Chair Flaherty. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Member Maglio. So could we please have a roll call?
Council Reynolds,
Yay.
Council Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Mackin,
Aye.
Councilor Maglio.
Aye.
That's 4 in
Terrific.
favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, well, thank you. So we will now forward that recommendation to the full council, Mr. Lamphere, and we are really looking forward to having you become a member of a very important board in this town, specifically the perspectives and experiences that you bring. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Terrific. Thanks.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I failed to, I know we normally in the process, and Mr. Lamphere, you're more than welcome to stay and attend the rest of the meeting if you'd like. Normally what we would do is we'd look at the approval of minutes. And we do have a set of minutes to be approved by the committee. Those are the minutes of November 8th, 2021. And just as a, I know that there was some clarification provided to members, new members, myself included, of the council when it comes to voting for minutes of the previous council body. And we are, having familiarized ourselves with the minutes themselves, have that ability to vote on the motion. Sue, is there anything else that I may have missed in that?
Just real quick, it's, the question is it all right for you to vote to approve minutes of a meeting if you are absent? And Robert's Rules of Order gives a resounding yes as an answer to this question. Minutes are just expressing your confidence in the veracity of the secretary and the actions of your colleagues and the correctness of the minutes preparation process. Anybody have any
Terrific.
questions on that? Okay.
I don't think we have any questions. Okay, so we'll then proceed. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of November 8th, 2021?
Motion to approve the minutes of November 8th, 2021.
Okay, Councilor, thank you. Councilor Flaherty, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, and a second by Councilor Maglio. Roll call, please, Clerk Semino.
Councilor Reynolds,
Yay.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Mackin,
Aye.
Councilor Maglio.
Yes.
That's 4 in favor, 0 opposed.
Terrific. Okay, we've got that piece of housekeeping out of the way. We're going to move on now to the next new business item. This is 21060. The mayor authorization to accept donations or take up any action related thereto. Excuse me. So, Chief of Staff Tom, if you could just kind of set the table for us on this, please.
Certainly, thank you. And I was joined up until moments ago by Sergeant Corey Chambers from the police department as folks who were involved or tuning into last year's budget process. You recall Corey had stepped in, kind of come off the road and into the office to assist with the financial situation at the police department, given his background in the area. He was working and unfortunately had to leave because a call came in. So I told him I would do my best to cover and represent and hopefully answer questions that the committee may have on this. As folks may or may not know, in order for the town to accept a donation, it has to go through the council for approval. Last year, Envision Bank had a promotion where if a new customer opened a checking account, or if a customer opened a new checking account, they would donate $10 to a local animal shelter. From what I've seen, they had a list of animal shelters available for donation, but folks decided that they wanted to donate their percentage of the account to our animal shelter, which for those of you that don't know is located at 282 Union Street, and it's a facility that we share with Weymouth and is utilized by the animal control officer in the event that lost or stray animals are found in town or in Weymouth. So with that, we are asking for the committee to recommend favorably to the full council that we accept the donation in the amount of $300 for use to purchase new dog beds, food, and treats for animals that come into our possession, again, through the animal control officer. Thank you.
Terrific. All right, I'd like to ask any of the committee members if they have any questions concerning this matter. Okay, it looks like there are none. So that being said, is there a motion for order 21061?
For favorable recommendation to the full council that the town of Braintree be and hereby is authorized in accordance with section 53A of chapter 44 of the Massachusetts General Laws to accept the following gift upon the conditions attached and herein set forth. Envision Bank, $300, animal control shelter.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have a second on this motion?
Second.
Okay, second by Councilor Maglio. So roll call, please, if you would, Clerk Semino.
Councilor Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Mackin,
Aye.
Councilor Maglio.
Aye.
That's 4 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
That is unanimous. Okay, well, thank you. So there's we thank you for that item. And now let's move on to the last item under new business for this evening. And this is 21062, Mayor borrowing authorization, Tri-Town Water Treatment Plant, or take up any action related thereto. And the public hearing on this for the full council will be next Tuesday evening, February 1st. So I'm going to leave it up to Chief of Staff, Tom, if she can present this motion, and certainly any additional comments from the administration.
Certainly. Thank you again, Chairman Reynolds. So everybody should have received a copy of the memo that accompanies this request. This is information that comes to us through Environmental Partners, our OPM, or Owners Project Manager, on the Tri-Town Water District and corresponding treatment plant project. This has been a long time project, something that we've been working on for some time in conjunction with our partners in Randolph and Holbrook to build a new state-of-the-art facility to replace the existing two facilities that are currently operational. The percentage for split is something that's established legislatively that the council voted on 2020, I want to say, that calls for Braintree to pay 50% of the capital costs relating to the treatment plant. So as of this time, we have appropriated $33.7 million for design and construction and engineering services for the project. And based on the most current cost estimation that was completed at the 90% design phase, additional funding is required. Well, let me rephrase that. The cost estimators, for a variety of reasons, which are detailed in the memo, have indicated that the prices are likely to increase from the original estimation that we received for the project. And in order to apply for the funding for the project, a low interest loan that we're available for, all three communities have to appropriate the full value cost of the project at the time of and so that is why this memo is coming to you this evening and not in the form of a capital request, because we are in the process of applying for and securing that funding through the state. And just because this is the authorization amount does not necessarily mean that this is ultimately going to be the cost of the project. And I use South Middle School as a great example for what I'm talking about. As folks probably know, we had an initial budget estimate for South. Then we had a subsequent budget estimate that included kind of the time delays and the COVID impacts on things that was significantly higher than the original. When the project ultimately went out to bid, the awarded contractor's bid was lower, not only from the higher cost estimate, but it was in fact lower than the original cost estimate. But what this does is that for funding purposes, ensures that we have the full value of the cost estimated at the 90% design phase, which is where we are now, appropriated so that they can process our application. We are looking for an additional $5,680,809, which is our half of the additional cost according to the 90% design estimate. I do have with me this evening Jim Arsenault, Director of the Department of Public Works, who has been actively involved in this process since the beginning, as well as Ed Spellman, Director of Finance, who also has been actively involved in Tri-Town and specifically the funding for the project. I think probably since we started talking about it, if I'm not mistaken, for both of you. So with that, happy to take any questions or also refer to Ed or Jim to help provide information to the committee.
Terrific. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for bringing along your subject matter experts on this matter. So I'd like to ask the members, the committee members, for any questions that they may have or comments concerning this matter. Anybody have questions? All right. Vice Chair Flaherty, please. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you. I have a couple of questions. One has to do with the timing of this. When we were talking about this project in April of 2021, the timeline that was put forward was that the design is projected to be complete by the end of the summer, and that bidding would be complete by February of 2022. And I'm just, now we're somewhat delayed, and I'm looking to find out, what accounts for the delays.
So through the chair, so
Yes.
we're not, and I'll kind of give a little bit of an overview and then ask Jim if he wants to supplement. We've completed the equipment pre-selection that happened over the summer, and we are in the process now of doing the contractor pre-qualifications. That will be done first week of March, and then the full bid, including general contractor selection, will be open June 22nd of 2022. So while there have been some tweaks and adjustments in the schedule, there haven't been any major delays since the last time the schedule was set. And through the chair, if Jim wants to elaborate on that, he certainly
Certainly, please.
Sure.
Start small.
Through the yeah, basically it's a multifaceted. The bid isn't like you advertise the bid and it's done on some typical smaller projects. So what you got to do is you got to do some advanced purchases, which Nicole mentioned was done this past summer. And then then coming up soon will be advertising some of the filed sub bidders. So we have to notify them and get them in process. And that's kind of the beginning of the bid process. And so it's kind of, when you talk about the actual bids, it's kind of hard to describe it because there's many different types of bid processes included in a large project like this. But this particular, when I mentioned the bid start date, I was mentioning, February is the timeline. And so it's going to be like March 10, so a few days later, which is really not a significant change. And then, so we had always all along proposed that this be the timeline for it. But then the actual opening for the overall construction, that's done, later on. So that would be in around June. And then the process of getting the construction going, filing papers and all that, it's around August or so before the actual construction would break ground. So that's been that really hasn't had any significant changes since I've been working on the project from the beginning. They really haven't modified anything at this time. I mean, not to say something couldn't be changed in the future, but right now it's been pretty much right on target. So.
Okay. All right. So I'm glad to know that that you're on track. That's important. The next question I have is, so the district is applying to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and we're going to get a low interest. We're applying for a low interest loan. That's the reason for this appropriation tonight. But what is that intended to be used for? Everybody's muted.
Through the chair.
Yes. Director Arsenal.
Ed knows a lot more than I do, so you're the person for that. I mean, I can tell you roughly, but I think Ed is well versed on that, if you don't mind.
Okay, so the chair recognizes Director Spellman.
This authorization brings the total needed for Braintree's share of the total projected costs, and the SRF, the state revolving fund, requires that all three of the communities have the total appropriation there available. And what we're looking for through the trust is a low interest loan. Currently it's at 2% for 20 years and 2.4% for 30 years. And did that answer your question, Counselor?
So you're telling me that the low interest loan is going to go to contribute to Braintree's portion of the cost of building the plant?
Correct. The three individual communities had authorized their share of the debt individually. So my understanding is the trust is going to contract with the three communities individually for the borrowing of their share of this project.
So we demonstrate that we can appropriate the full cost, and in return, they help us get a low interest loan?
We'll be borrowing the money through the trust at a lower rate than the current market.
The current bond market, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that helps me understand. And so we're not going to put this in the capital plan because we have to do this right now and the capital plan's not ready. So I understand that. But then, of course, now we're going to take, if we do this, we'll have $5.6 million of debt service to attend to that won't be available for other projects. So my question now is like, what are the trade-offs that we're making now to take on this debt that we're not going to be able to do other capital projects that we're not going to be able to do because we're taking on this debt? Do we have a plan for that?
This debt service is going to be paid by the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund. So the money, the debt service for that will be coming from the water and sewer rates. It won't have an impact on capital for the general fund.
Okay. Okay, so the last question is that because ARPA allows for water sewer uses, we're not using this money. We're not going to use that money, the ARPA money, for this because we're going to avail ourselves of the low interest loan. Is that correct?
We are not going to use the direct allocation to Braintree or through the county ARPA funds for this project. There are other federal funds available, and we're looking at exploring options to see if we can get some funds from other ARPA projects and other state funds out there. The state has available ARPA funds that have not yet been allocated, and I believe some are going to be allocated towards capital projects, specifically water and sewer projects. And we're looking at options there with the state.
Okay, so do we have an itemized list of the ways in which we have spent ARPA money thus far?
The ARPA funds that have been spent to date in the fiscal 22 budget, I believe it was $1,769,000 that was voted in the 22 budget, and that was for revenue replacement. That was half of the town's direct allocation that we received last June. And the town will be receiving the second half of its allocation this June.
And that's also going to be used for revenue replacement. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's, thank you for that. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Member Mackin, any questions or comments?
Well, sir.
I'm sorry?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Member Maglio, questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have a couple of questions and just some follow-up here. So thank you for answering my question earlier regarding, or the question that was asked earlier about this revolving fund availability and the benefit of taking advantage of the revolving fund low interest loans. And also, just for clarifying to me or for me, it would be a less of a cost to the community to pursue that loan versus floating a bond against the enterprise account. The likelihood of the approval after the fact, I understand this is a process and familiar with other projects very similar that a community has to prove its ability to pay or to finance fully a project. Just from a risk perspective, I can understand that. In this particular case, what is your level of confidence? And I'm assuming it is a high level of confidence, but I would like to just hear from you, from the administration, the likelihood of that approval and also the amounts that may be available to us in that loan process. So I'm Chief of Staff, Tom.
So, as I sit here and in talking with environmental partners and Helen Gordon and representatives from the other communities, I have an incredibly high level of confidence that this project is going to be awarded the funding. This is, as you know, been a multi-year undertaking to make sure that when the application gets filed, it is a strong application that meets all of the requirements for the funding in order to allow us to move forward as planned. This has always been the plan for this project, and I have the utmost confidence in the team that's been working on not only on the design, but also the application and being overseen through environmental partners that we are going to secure the funding. As for the amounts, I would look to either Director Spellman or Director Arsenault if they had a more detailed breakdown on the availability of the funding specifically.
So certainly, Director Arsenault.
Yes, through the chair. Yeah, so we had actually gone through the process for securing the SRF funding. So we were accepted for it. We'd have to go through the process of the paperwork and making sure everything supports it and all that. But the state did approve it. So it's just a matter of getting that documentation and paperwork in place and all of the information that they require. So we're pretty much gonna, like Nicole said, it's very high certainty that this will move forward with this project.
Right, and certainly I heard that message, and I feel confident in the way that was expressed. However, do you have any insights into yourself or the Director of Finance, Spellman, into what actual amounts may be available to us through that loan?
Well, the loan is usually set to the total amount that's required for the project. They don't give all of the funding right away. What they do is they give a certain amount to begin with, because they know when you first start a project, you don't need all of the funding right away. And so that funding is provided for the beginning of the project, and as it moves through, they allocate more funding. But the funding, as far as how much funding is available, you have to pay back as a loan. So they don't really, I don't think there's any cap, and Ed may know more on how much we can receive from it. It may, we give them an estimated cost of the project, but if for some reason it went up, then I would think that we probably could secure additional funding if needed. Ed would know more about that. So
certainly, Director Spellman.
Yeah, the latest estimates that we have from environmental partners have a projected cost, and the SRF has reviewed those costs, and the eligible costs would be borne by the three communities. And as Jim had said, we've got tentative approval for it. We're just submitting the final additional paperwork to move forward with the process.
Terrific. Thank you. I understand that, and I appreciate your responses there. So you used a key term there, eligible for reimbursement or eligible loans from the SRF. So if I heard correctly, it sounds like most of this project is eligible. Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, that's a terrific thing to hear. I mean, the money that we could save on a low interest loan versus us having to go to market and float those bonds and have that against our credit limit. This is terrific. Is there any monies that have to be, any collateral, anything from the town's perspective, or it just shows an ability for us to continue to pay this loan amount through our water and sewer rates? Director Spellman?
This additional bond authorization would bring the total of the town's potential liability up to that number needed to move forward with the SRF funding in their application process. So this authorization is basically committing the town to the project.
And I'm with you there.
And the funding for the debt service for this would come from the water and sewer rates.
Correct, and I'm right. Thank you for confirming my understanding of that. My question is, and please, my apologies if it was unclear, that the full cost that we have allocated, I'll break it down this way. The monies that we have already allocated as part of Braintree's cost for this project, we're bonding it, correct?
We have currently the authorization to borrow a total of $33,700,000.
Right.
Seeking an additional amount of $5,681,000, which would bring the total up to $39,380,000.
And I'm on board with you there. I perfectly understand that. That's worst case scenario. We can pay for this ourselves. I understand. My question is, this is a hypothetical. We are approved for a low interest loan from the SRF. Okay. The amounts of money now, certainly the town, the administration would make a decision whether or not they would like to go with a 20-year loan or a 30-year loan. And then the third option would be the bonding, which you just explained has already been approved. All right, to borrow against our water and sewer bonding. Correct? I have the situation and the options correct?
Before you tonight, and what's been previously authorized would be the total bond authorizations for the project. And the wording of these bond authorizations allow us to go through the SRF for the low interest loan, or go out to the market, public market, and issue bonds on our own. So this
Understood.
language and the authorizations for your review and approval give the town the option to do either one. It doesn't limit one or the other.
Terrific. And I'm going to leave it at that. That is a good answer. It gives us good options as a community. It's always nice to have these options. And certainly I trust the administration is going to look at what's going to be the least expensive option for the town. That's going to allow us that flexibility in other areas that we need to focus on. So thank you. I appreciate that. And just one last question, if I may. Chief of Staff Todd, I'm not sure who would be best suited to answer this question, but in the scenario of the potential infrastructure funding that's going to follow the current opera monies, I know there is, and I'm not sure if that would pertain to the recently passed infrastructure bill at the federal level. Those are monies also that are potentially in the pipeline for us to help us with infrastructure related projects. I just want to make sure that is exactly what I heard.
That is correct. And we have been in touch with representatives from the local delegation about ways to capitalize on potential additional funding that would effectively just serve to reduce the borrowing that we would have to do in order to fund our share.
Terrific. That is good news. And I know, I think it was Councilor Flaherty had made a comment earlier about some of the other expenses that we are potentially going to be looking at in operating budgets, capital budgets, et cetera. And that is good news to hear, particularly from this committee's perspective and its role of oversight, and also being having the charge of that oversight and financial matters. So thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. I am feeling confident as an individual counselor here in this committee about the way this is going to proceed. And so at this point, I would like to ask if there is, well, first of all, let me just ask one last time of any of the other fellow counselors if there's any additional follow-up questions or comments.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes, the chair recognizes Councilor Maglio.
Thank you. So a couple of times tonight, we've heard about the ratepayer, and how some of this will be funneled through to the ratepayer. And it makes me wonder, what ultimately will that impact look like for ratepayers in the three towns?
So if I may, there won't be an additional charge that gets passed down to the ratepayers, but the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, which is generated based on revenue received through the water rates, is where the funding source will come from separate from the operating budget and the general fund money, which comes separately. So when we talk about the ratepayers, it's rates that are already being paid as part of the services already being provided that make up the separate water and sewer account. So it doesn't come out of the general fund. That's the reference to ratepayers.
Okay. I think I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
if I may, actually, while we're talking about it, just to recognize Councilor Maglio, she did forward along some information about a possible grant opportunity. And we have decided to work with environmental partners to submit an application for funding specific to the water treatment plant. So in talking about ARPA and grant opportunities, I was reminded of that email exchange. So I did want to take an opportunity to thank Councilor Maglio for providing that information, and we'll certainly continue to provide updates on what is hopefully our successful application for funding.
Awesome. Good luck. Great. Thank you.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thank you, Councilor Maglio. Okay, so I did have another. I'll bypass that. I know what I was. So I do recognize that this is more to Director Arsenault. I do recognize that as a part of regular process of how water and sewer rates are set and how those processes are factored and assessed each year, that there has for a number of years now being factored into this is the cost, Braintree's cost of building this new water treatment plant. So, there was some planning ahead the current administration has done and the previous administration has done. So I want to say thank you to that. That's thinking, again, good financial practices. Okay, so since that is it for comments, is there a motion for order 21062?
For favorable recommendation to the full council, ordered that the town of Braintree appropriates $5,681,000 to pay the town's share of the costs of designing, constructing, equipping, and furnishing the Tri-Town Water Treatment Plant, which is to be undertaken with the towns of Randolph and Holbrook, and for the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, which amount shall be expended in addition to all other amounts previously appropriated by the town for this project. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to GLC 447184 or pursuant to any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. The amount authorized to be borrowed by this order shall be reduced to the extent of any grants received by the town on account of this project. All or any portion of the amount authorized to be borrowed by this order may be obtained through the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. Any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this order, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this order in accordance with GLC 4420 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Thank you. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay, I recognize that Councilor Mackin has seconded that. And if Clerk Semina would please go ahead with the roll call.
Councilor Reynolds,
Aye.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Mackin,
Aye.
Councilor Maglio,
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
Great, that's unanimous in favor. The motion passes for a favorable recommendation to the full council. Okay, so just want to do a double check here on our agenda. I think we have completed all of our stated business this evening. And I want to thank the mayor's office, Chief of Staff Taub, Finance Director Spellman, DPW Director Arsenault, and certainly Mr. Lampier. It looks like he stuck around to listen to this type of business, so which is a good thing. And so thank you to my fellow councilors, and Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, moved. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
I apologize. That was my typo. Let me do, if you don't mind, I do a roll
Do the
call.
roll call?
Thank
All
you.
right.
Counselor Reynolds,
Aye.
Counselor Flaherty,
Yes.
Counselor Mackin,
Aye.
Counselor Maglio,
Aye.
all in favor to adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
All right, thank you all. The meeting is
Thanks.
adjourned. Have a good evening,
Bye.
Good
everyone.
night. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.